Welcome to the Clutch Kitten Gaming Podcast, where I play an indie game for 5 hours and let you know whether or not it's worth your time and money. Hello and welcome everyone. This is James, also known as Clutch Kitten, and I am so glad that you're here with me today. This is episode number 17. Truly, it feels crazy that we're already to 17. It has been such a fun ride, and I'm looking forward to many, many more. Really quickly, I want to remind you to subscribe to the podcast if you're not already, and if you enjoy what you hear each week, go ahead and consider jumping onto iTunes and giving the show a 5-star review. Also, I love to hear feedback from all of you, so if you have questions, comments, or random thoughts, go ahead and shoot me an email at clutchkittengaming@gmail.com. The story from this week actually has to do with some more drama in the gaming sphere. According to an article on Variety by Brian Crescent, a gaming website called Trusted Reviews, which is owned by TI Media, a British magazine and digital publisher, they issued an apology to Take-Two Interactive for running a leak story about Red Dead Redemption 2 in February of this year. If you're not familiar with Take-Two Interactive, they're a leading developer, publisher, and marketer who owns a few different gaming labels including Rockstar Games and 2K. Apparently this article run by Trusted Reviews used information that was sourced from a confidential corporate document, and they say that they should not have published it. As what appears to be an act of good faith, they posted an apology online in place of that article, and they've agreed to donate over £1 million to charities chosen by Take-Two Games. It's obviously hard to know all the inner workings of what happened here, but I am glad to see that this is happening. I'm sure when gaming media stumbles upon confidential information that they could leak, it's tough to not exploit that knowledge. And as much as I love learning exclusive information about an exciting game that's coming out, confidential information should be kept as what it is, confidential. So it's November now, and we got past that Halloween stage where we needed to look at a scary game, and after I scared myself half to death with last week's horror game, I figured that I deserved a much needed rest at the beach. That's why I broke out today's game. Today we're going to be talking about Yoku's Island Express. This is an open world, Metroidvania style pinball adventure. We'll get more into the mechanics later, but what you should know now is that this is primarily a Metroid-like with some pinball mechanics mixed in. As a quick reminder, Metroidvania is a subgenre that mixes a lot of elements from both Metroid and Castlevania. According to the great source of all knowledge, Wikipedia, generally these types of games feature a large interconnected world map, which you as the player can explore, although access to parts of the world are often gated by obstacles that need special items to get through. Yoku's Island Express was released on May 29th of this year and was developed by Villa Gorilla. Villa Gorilla is located in Stockholm, Sweden, and was founded by Jens Andersson and Matthias Snigg, who are both AAA veterans. Jens was actually a founding member of Starbreeze and played a huge part in both the Chronicles of Riddick, Escape from Butcher Bay, and The Darkness. Matthias also worked on The Darkness, and what's funny is that they both moved from these dark and heavy and bloody games to this incredibly lighthearted and fun game. Although Yoku's Island Express is their first game as Villa Gorilla, there's a lot of talent behind this title. It currently costs $19.99 on Steam, and according to HowLongToBeat.com, it takes 6 hours to complete the main story and upwards of 12 hours for a completionist. There are both mouse and keyboard and gamepad support, but I personally stuck with the controller the whole time. The controller worked great for me, and from what I've heard and read, the keyboard also works really well. Let's move now into narrative. You know how starting a new job is a tough endeavor? There's procedures to learn, people to meet, and an entirely new culture to become familiar with. Imagine with me now that you were hired for your dream job, and on your first day, you were told that the CEO was insulted on Twitter by someone who's an actual threat to the company, and you are the one that has to save the CEO and the company from imminent takeover. In today's game, Yoku faces a similar challenge on his first day as the island postmaster. When you come ashore to relieve the last postmaster, the posterdactyl, you find out that Mokumana, the island deity and lifeblood of the island, was marked by the God Slayer, and you need to gather the 3 chiefs from the island to help save him. Although delivering a message to the 3 leaders might sound like a simple endeavor, this is no ordinary island, and Yoku is no ordinary postmaster. Yoku's Island Express is set on a beautiful place called Mokumana Island. The island is huge, and so is the variety of environments that you'll encounter. There's icy peaks, sandy beaches, dark caves, tropical forests, and scorched deserts. You, as Yoku, are the primary character. Even when it comes to the main plot of the story, you aren't really interacting with the chiefs or Mokumana all that often. This game is sometimes described as a 2D open world game, and it really does feel like just that. Just like how you can roam all over Skyrim in the game Skyrim, ignoring the main quest, you can roam all over Mokumana, just exploring and unlocking new areas and items. You can interact with the main story at your own pace. As such, you don't interact with specific people very often unless you choose to. When it comes to background narrative and world building, the game is actually very rich. Unlike many Metroidvania-style games which focus on combat and fighting through to the bosses, Yoku's Island Express really feels like an exciting and friendly adventure. We'll get into more details on the mechanics later, but there really isn't combat in this game. Instead of traveling from area to area killing enemies to unlock new locations, you're a cute beatle mailman who's traveling from area to area helping the inhabitants of the island and delivering mail. That's where a majority of the narrative was built in the case of my time playing. I helped a mouse find her children, I fixed a ventilation system, I found an egg that someone had lost, I planted mushrooms for a friend, and I did so much more. It seemed like every NPC I came to had a small quest for me to go on. Although it's important for the game to have a primary plot, I think what contributed the most to my enjoyment were those small quests where I helped people out. This leads us into the importance of the story. I haven't finished the game yet, so I don't know the ending story beats, but I do think that all of these world-building quests were key to the game. In conjunction with the art and sound design, the narrative contributed to a lighthearted and fun game. Yes, you are trying to figure out the mystery of the big bad God Slayer, but that didn't really give me fear. Instead, it gave me a connection with the rest of the characters. We were all working towards saving our beloved island, and the more I helped them, the better chance we had at being successful. In my opinion, the writing was great. It's not primarily a narrative experience, but I think the writing and story played an important role in creating a positive feeling as I played through the game. Let's look now at the mechanics of the game. What may have surprised you when you heard the genre was that there's a pinball element to this game. Since that's the mechanic that drives everything from exploration to puzzle solving, let's dive right in. The entire time you walk around, your character Yoku has a ball attached to him. It looks like one of those smooth white foosballs and is about the same size if not a little bigger than Yoku. Although I can't remember if the game explains why you're forever attached to this ball, it comes very much in handy on the island. In most Metroidvania-style games, such as Hollow Knight and Dead Cells, and honestly most games in general, you have a jump. Usually we as gamers take that for granted because it feels like 99% of games have a jump even when they hardly serve you a purpose. Yoku's Island Express slots into that 1% because Yoku has no jump. Instead of creating a traditional platforming experience, Villa Gorilla implemented the most random mechanic of pinball into this game. Don't get me wrong though, I love this mechanic. When you're walking around the world, you're mostly just dragging your ball along, but there are a lot of areas in the island that require you to reach some places higher, or destroy some thorns, or you just need to collect some fruit. When you reach one of those areas, there's usually a drop-in point which puts you onto a part of the map with pinball flippers. Each one of those areas has a different design, size, and purpose, but they are all incredibly fun. These areas don't look any different than the rest of the world other than having these pinball flippers. This is where your ball comes in handy. You play these areas like you would a traditional pinball table, and you try to reach a new area or a secret zone. This isn't a puzzle game per se, but like most other Metroidvanias, going from point A to point B generally entails much more than just walking there. You might need to do something like collect 3 gems to open a gate, and then use your slug vacuum to collect a slug and destroy the bramble blocking your way. Or you might have to enter a pinball zone to break a crystal, which enters another pinball zone, where you have to collect 3 items so that you can drop down to the area you're trying to get to. When I first heard about Yoku's Island Express, I was skeptical about the pinball aspect, but Villa Gorilla did a wonderful job of incorporating that mechanic into the world. The current ecosystem of gaming is stock full of platformers and Metroidvanias with traditional movement mechanics. Yoku's Island Express is such a refreshing break from that. Another aspect of the pinball that I thought was positive was the fact that it was much less punishing than many other games. If you dropped to the bottom of a pinball area, Yoku and the ball would fall through some thistles, and you would lose a small bit of your fruit currency, but fruit is so easy to come by that it never felt that frustrating. Even when a puzzle or pinball area was tough, you could keep trying without getting too angry. Although the pinball mechanic as a whole felt less mechanically intensive than maybe another platformer, there are definitely some tough challenges and puzzles. Luckily, they always felt doable. In many platformers, your success is directly correlated with your frame-perfect skills of jumping, and to me that's sometimes disheartening. To me, the pinball mechanic in this game was such an interesting and amazing iteration on the Metroidvania genre. So other than the pinball puzzles, what are you going to be doing in this game? Let's talk a bit more broadly about the flow of the game, just so I don't get into the minutia of every mechanic you'll unlock. Early on, as you explore, your path is pretty directed since you have no special abilities unlocked yet. You can't swim underwater, you can't vacuum slugs, and you can't swing on flowers. The game naturally pushes you to certain areas where quests are unlocked, and you can slowly obtain new abilities. After that initial push, the world really opens up. I would find myself pushing the limits on how far I could explore, and seeing what else there is to see in the island. This leads us into my main complaint about the game: backtracking. If you're groaning internally right now, I do understand that it's a normal thing in Metroidvanias, but that's the only thing about this game that really annoyed me. Because there are a bunch of gated areas that can only be unlocked with enough fruit or the right abilities and items, you'll be backtracking to those places to unlock them later. This is both good and bad. On the positive side, Mokumana Island is beautiful, and it's a fun world to be in. But on the negative side, going from point A to point B is really not easy. Although many shortcuts are unlocked once you've been somewhere, you often have to take an incredibly indirect path to find a place. When you add that into having to backtrack at times, it leads to an experience that sometimes feels like a waste. If I'm to play devil's advocate with my own argument, I would say the following 2 things. 1, I am definitely not an expert at Metroidvanias, so I do believe there were times where I was inefficient in my pathing. If I had been more intentional about where and when I went places, I probably wouldn't have had to backtrack quite as much. Secondly, the game did provide easier traveling the further you got into the game. You start unlocking these things called the beeline, like the insect, where you can shoot yourself in this barrel to another beeline stop. It actually reminded me a lot of Donkey Kong when you're shooting yourself out of these barrels to other barrels. Once you start unlocking those, the map started feeling a lot smaller in a good way. Also, like I mentioned earlier, once you reach a place, a shortcut is often unlocked, which made returning there a whole lot easier later on. Overall, I thought the mechanics of Yoku's Island Express were extremely fun. The backtracking was a small mar on my enjoyment, but I do think the game added new abilities in a nice pace, and getting around with the pinball mechanics was a blast. Let's jump into our final category: art and sound design. When it comes to the art, this game is a bit overwhelming initially. It's bright and colorful, and a ton is going on. As you get used to the busyness of the screen, the art becomes more and more wonderful. I am a fan of dark and intense art, but I can't help but enjoy the feelings this world gave me. It's incredibly cute, and I was struck with the wonderful variety of landscape you encounter as well. It's also awesome because you can collect sprinkles to color your ball, and as dumb as it sounds, it added another fun flair to the color and art of the game. The sound design was also solid. The music was lighthearted and had island vibes. Each location had different effects and tunes, and the pinball sounds were on point. That might actually be the key thing. Sound design is so important to real-life pinball, and I think Villa Gorilla did a wonderful job themselves. Like I mentioned earlier, everything from the art to the sound design to the narrative gives you the feeling that you're a part of the gang on this island, and that you have an important role to play. It's inclusive and lighthearted, and was an amazing change from the darkness of Little Nightmares from last week. In summary, what are the positives and negatives of Yoku's Island Express? On the positive side, the pinball mechanics provided a fresh way to play the Metroidvania genre, and the lightheartedness of the world was superb. The puzzles and pinball fields were a perfect challenge, and each new item I got added a fun way to play. On the negative side, I wish more quick travel mechanics were unlocked earlier in order to avoid the amount of backtracking I did. If I was to critique the story at all, the main plot didn't feel like it had weight on the game. Maybe it's good that it didn't, since it might have cast a shadow that could have taken away from the lightheartedness I felt, but the main plot was mediocre in my book. The side quests and characters you encounter, though, did make up for the lack in the main story. We've made it to the final boss. This is the part of the podcast where I tell you whether you should slay the game and buy it, flee the game and avoid it, or farm up and wait for a sale. My verdict is to slay the game. I was a little worried coming in because I don't have a ton of experience with Metroidvanias. They're honestly a bit intimidating to me, but this was a solid experience overall. I believe the tone of the game set me off on the right foot, and everything I've played so far has been super fun. I'm really looking forward to finishing out the rest of this story and seeing what else there is to see. As always, thank you guys so much for listening in. I had a ton of fun on today's episode, and I'm looking forward to recording next week already. If you want to keep up on what I'm playing for the podcast, the best way to do that is to follow me on Instagram at ClutchKittenGaming. If you end up playing Yoku's Island Express after listening to the episode, or you've played it already, I would love to hear your feedback on what you enjoyed and what you didn't enjoy, and whether or not you agree with my review. I hope you guys have an awesome start to November, and I'll see you in game.